If you're over 60 and looking for a job and you're really struggling to land that interview, it's probably due to several reasons. Today, I'm going to go over my thoughts on securing an interview, what I did to get my job, which I've just gone into. I think I've been in there for about 4 months now. And I'm going to go through the strategies that I used with my resume, right through to getting the interview and the interview process. So if you're really struggling and you just keep getting turned down and you don't even get to first base, then stay with me and I will share with you my experience and how I managed to get a job at the age of 63. So welcome to my channel. My name's Leanne. If you're a returning subscriber, it's great to see you again. And if you're new here, welcome. The reason I'm doing this episode is because I received a lot of feedback from a lot of you out there in relation to work on my last video, which was the good and the bad of working past 60. And it seems that there's a lot of you out there, or quite a few of you, that you either hate your job, but you're too afraid to make that change because you think that you're not employable and nobody's going to look at you at the age you are now. Or you do need a job, you're not working, and you find that you just cannot even get to the interview stage. And there's a couple of you out there that have said that you've put in, hundreds of resumes and just not received one return call to invite you in for an interview. So, I sort of think you've got to go right back. There's a disconnect happening there between your resume and what the employer is looking for. And I don't believe there has to be. And I'm not tooting my own horn here at all, but I'd never had an issue getting work. I think that, yes, you can. I think it's just a matter of really looking at what your strategy is and going back. And if you're not getting to that interview stage, then there's clearly something wrong with your cover letter and your resume, because you should be at least getting to that stage. So I'm just going to go through a few things today, and hopefully it'll help you and just sort of make you look at things differently and help you get that next job. So the first thing is, I think initially, and I found this as well, is it's really hard to actually find the job that you want. And, and I've been laid off twice, in the last few years. One was a redundancy, and the other one I just, couldn't meet my targets. It was quite hard, and they ended up laying me off in my probationary period. And there was no comeback from that. When you're in your probationary period, that's it. So I've had to sort of change jobs a few times in the last 3 years. And if you've watched some of my previous videos, you'll know that and the process that I went through. When looking for work, I think at our age, you do have to really network. I think that a lot of jobs can come through networking and talking to people. I am a big advocate of using an agency if you need to, because they get to know you personally, and you go in, you meet with them, have a chat, and they are an advocate for you to put you forward to an employer. And I think that if you're trying to do it off your own back and you're just not getting anywhere, I find an agency can be super helpful in putting you forward. They've met you, they know your personality, and I think that that's really helpful than trying to go in cold to an employer that has no idea who you are. So that can really help if you're really struggling to do it on your own. I would definitely use my network, talk to people. Some people don't have a big network, I get that. So that's where an agency will definitely help you and sort of go in and, as I said, be an advocate for you to try and find work. And a lot of companies do use agencies, so I think that's a great help. The other thing is working on your resume. And I've had so many different careers throughout my life that I could have a resume, 10 pages long. But it doesn't help you, especially at our age, if you try and put in every single thing. A resume these days, what's acceptable is 2 pages. So I found that I had to really scale down my resume and just include the last, say, 10 to 15 years. And and it's hard because I do have a lot of experience in other areas. So sometimes you need to put a little summary in there of your previous work experience, but don't do a chronological resume of just absolutely everything if you're trying to showcase some previous experience as well. It's just very dated. It doesn't help you. You just really need to scale that down and keep it to 2 pages. I also think that maybe people try to put everything in and make it a generic sort of resume. You need to, I find, when I was going into sales, I had a lot of experience as an executive assistant, which isn't sales. So you need to try and highlight what the sales component, and sort of try and work out how you can sort of showcase sales without it, when you haven't got a lot of background in sales. I had a little bit because I'd sort of been managing a retirement home, and part of that component was selling houses. So when I went into sales, I really highlighted that part of my resume. I think some people it's too generic, and if you're going for a specific position, it's just way too generic across the board. So you just really need to take those parts of that of your resume and blow them up a bit more, and just really specifically highlight those, if that makes sense. Because otherwise, it's just going to come across just way too generic for the employer, and you're not showcasing or highlighting those specific skills for that job. So just be really aware of that. The other thing is you need to look at the format, look at the fonts. The fonts these days, I love Calibri, I think it is, or Arial. Those sort of types of fonts are really what people are using these days. You can put a little bit of colour in your resume. Look at the style. I keep my resume really simple. I do put a photo on my resume. It's up to you whether you do that. I like to do that because it's just, I don't know, it's just me. This is what I like to do. You don't have to do that. But just keep it really simple, really neat, and just be aware that your fonts aren't outdated, your style is not outdated, and just really look at your resume, because that is going to get you your interview. So it's a really vital part to focus on. And also, if you include technology in your resume, because you work with technology and certain computer programs on every day, make sure they're not outdated ones or programs that just are superseded, because that can make you look ancient. So don't include those. I would leave those sort of things out. If you don't, and be sort of a bit creative. Like if you use ChatGPT all the time, I use it constantly, probably on the daily, definitely. Include that in your resume. It shows that you understand AI, you use ChatGPT, even if it's just for, finding having a recipe or a diet sort of program made up here. It doesn't matter. You're using ChatGPT, and it's really, it's important to include that. So you need to sort of think a bit laterally when you're doing a resume. Don't limit yourself, and really think about the things that you use. You're used to sort of doing research on the internet, all sorts of things. They're not to be downplayed, and they are at our age. I think, and I go back to ChatGPT because AI is such a big thing, and probably most of you are using that anyway. But it's really important because at our age, going for a job, it shows that, yes, we are keeping up with the times, and, we're comfortable with AI. And as we move forward, we're not being left behind and sort of thought of as old relics to trying to find a job. So just really sit down and have a read through your resume, and just see where it's looking a little bit ancient, or you've got just too much in there. I find ChatGPT really helpful, when I want to polish a resume, or even do a cover letter, because it just polishes it. So I put my resume in there, and it just, ChatGPT comes back with, probably maybe sometimes a bit better wording than what I can use. I do try and personalize it a bit more, because sometimes it can come across a bit stiff. So you just need to use ChatGPT, but just personalize it a little bit, or just sort of, don't let it be too stiff, if that makes sense. Cover letters are very, some people say they're just one of the most important things. And if they read, some people say people don't even read a cover letter. They just go straight to the resume. I have worked in HR. I really like reading a cover letter because I think it says a lot about the person. And, the resume is, obviously vitally important, but I like to see how somebody's written a cover letter because I think they're really hard to write. Like, I think a resume is easier than a cover letter. I think cover letters can be really, I don't know, I think they're tricky. Once again, if you're stumbling with that a little bit, use ChatGPT because it's so helpful. Once again, you need to personalize it a little bit. ChatGPT isn't always perfect, so some things may not read sort of properly. It might seem a bit, I don't know, a bit weird. So but definitely use it because it's so helpful. But you need to really focus on your cover letter. Don't repeat too much of what's in the resume. They can read your resume and see all of that. They want to know basically, why you have applied for that job. Why do you want that job? What makes you think that you're the best person for that job? A couple of lines about that. And, how you can help the company. What benefit are you to the company? What can you provide for the company to help them reach their goals? So there's those sort of different components in the cover letter, and that's what they want to see. Why are you going for that position? What can you bring to the table? How will that benefit the company? And if you keep that in mind as you're doing your cover letter, then I think that you'll have a pretty strong cover letter to put with your resume. So really focus on that. And if you do that and you get it right, and you sort of just take that time to sort of really polish your resume and your cover letter, I think that I'd be really surprised if you didn't get invited in for an interview. So very, very important. Need to focus on that and put a lot of time and energy into that. So if you don't I've put in resumes as well, and I've, applied for jobs and I haven't even heard from them. And so it has happened to me as well. So my takeaway for resumes and cover letters is, if you keep submitting your resume and cover letter to, dozens of companies and you're not even getting to first base, then there is seriously something wrong with your resume and your cover letter. And that's really blunt, sorry, but there is seriously something wrong to not even get invited in for an interview. So that is what you need to look at. That's my biggest takeaway, is that don't go blaming companies. It's not ageist at that point. I know there's ageism, but if you're not even getting to that stage, then your resume and your cover letters just aren't right. So really have a look at that. So the next thing is, you've done your resume, you've done your cover letter, and you've been invited in for an interview. So that's really exciting. So this is the next step where, people will sum you up in the first few seconds of meeting you. It's just how it is. That's life. That's how we are as human beings. So the next step is really looking at how you're presenting yourself. Are you polished? What are you wearing? And it sounds so superficial, but your clothing and your hair and how you present yourself is just so important. And people judge. They will judge. So, are you sort of modern in the way you dress, or are you old-fashioned? Or, you do really need to think about that. And, I know it's superficial, but you do have to be so polished and not look like an old relic, I guess. And so, you're up against, you're going into a company or somewhere where there's younger people and you're up against them. So, and I don't mean dressing ridiculously, young. So you sort of look silly, but you just really need, it's a really important factor is how you dress. Are your shoes polished? Are you, are your nails done? All sorts of things. You really need to think about the way you're presenting, because as soon as you walk through that door and you've got, maybe a panel interview of 3 or 4 people, they're going to judge you straight away. I'm really aware of that. I walk in, I have a big smile on my face. You need to be warm. You need to have vitality. You need to have energy. You need to feel excited. You can't be laid back and quiet and just, you have to put yourself forward and be enthusiastic, because they will pick up on that energy. People pick up on energy when you walk into a room. And if you're really subdued, they're going to pick up on that. If you walk in and you're really excited to see them, and I don't mean over the top excited, but just, have a great attitude, then they're going to pick up on that energy around you. So, really important, shake hands, look people in the eye. I get so nervous. I suffer from anxiety when I go into meetings. If I have to It's so funny, but if I'm in a meeting and then I have to speak, I do. I get really anxious. I find that before I go in to an interview, I do some deep breathing. So it's kind of like, that square breathing where you breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, and then hold for 4. And it's this, and it engages the amygdala or whatever at the back of your skull and your brain. And it's really good for anxiety, and it just calms everything down, and it just gets you back into out of that anxious state, emotional state, and back into a more of a flow. So I find that, if I'm nervous, and I always do it, I'll sit in the car and do some breathing before I go in for an interview, because I do get anxious. And it's funny because when I'm in the interview, people think I'm really confident, and I come across that I'm like I am now. I feel, smiling and chatty, but inside it's like, I'm just, I'm really nervous. And I also find in the interview, I can sometimes, if I'm nervous, start rambling. Luckily, I'm conscious of that and I can rein it back in. But I always say, if you're that type of person, just breathe, slow yourself down, and rein that sort of babbling back in if you tend to sort of start doing that. And a lot of us do, and it's just nerves, but you need to get a hold of that and not go off on a tangent. That's really important. I always really study up on the company. I want to know the basics, their values, what their values stand for, an overview of what they do. Get ready for the question of why do you think you're the best person for this position? You really need to think about why you would be the best person. I got asked that in my last interview. And just prepare. I just think preparation is key. I've been into interviews where I had to, have winged it before, but these days, and probably when I was younger, these days I don't. I really do a lot of prep, and I find that half the questions I prep for, I don't even get asked anyway. But I just really practice. I write them down. I write out questions. I go on the internet and sort of put it in ChatGPT. What kind of questions will I get asked? And I think about my answers. And I really do a lot of research and a lot of interview practice leading up to it, because I just don't want to get caught out. And I just, and just relax. I think if you've got the mindset of, it's not, the ball's not all in their court. It's also in your court, because you're also testing them. They're seeing whether you're a good fit. They're not judging you in the way of, it's personal. They want to know that they are getting the best person for that job, for that position. And I think that if you sort of look at it like that, and you also looking at the company to see whether, do I really want this? And I've actually been for interviews and then turned down a job when it's been offered to me, because after the interview and having that chat, it wasn't really what I wanted. So, and I wasn't going to take the first job that came along. So it's really nice to be in that position. So you need to reframe it and be in that position. They don't always have the upper hand unless you're desperate. But don't be like that, because there's jobs out there. But the ball's in your court as well, and you are seeing whether you want to be with that company. The other thing is be prepared to ask them questions. There's nothing worse than going in to an interview and then they say, have you got any questions for us? And you say, oh no, not really, no, I can't think of anything, it's all good. You need to sort of think about what you want to ask them. What's the culture like in the company? What's the team like that I'll be working with, and what's the most important part of that aspect of that role? There's lots of things that you can ask. So just think about what the sort of questions that you might want to ask them as well. And also reiterate that you are, you're wanting to learn more. You can bring a lot of experience to the role. You're still, you really love learning more and putting yourself, you love the challenges of that. They need to know that you're not just going in to a role and I'm going to plonk myself in that role and then that's it. You need to demonstrate that you can bring a lot of experience to that role, but you're also wanting to learn and you're a fast learner, and that you're not going to just plonk yourself in a chair and see out your role until the retirement days. You don't have to say that you want to climb that corporate ladder. And with the role that I've been in for about the past 4 months, I had like a performance meeting, which we do just regularly just to see where we're at with everything. And I've let them know that I'm not looking to move up or go into a management role. I've been in management roles. I don't want to do that at 63. I don't want the stress. So they know where my head's at. Really, really love what I'm doing. I've said to them, it's challenging, and it is. The role is varied, and I just want to become really good at what I'm doing within that role, and maybe, help other people that come in, with my experience, who might be new to the role because we're in a team. But I'm really clear on letting them know that at this point, I am not interested in moving to a leadership position. I've been there, done that. I don't want to take work home with me. I love the fact that I can walk out the door and I don't think about work. And they know that, I've told them that I don't want to walk out of the office door and come home and even have one thought about work. And I don't. So that's a really good thing. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. The question of where do you see yourself in 5 years? And one of my subscribers posed that question to me, and she said, what do you say when they ask you that? And you don't have to say, I would be so ambitious and I want to see myself here and in management. I just sort of would say something like, I see myself really contributing to my team with the experience that I've got, and, really sort of getting my head around everything and learning, and, just sort of being, really good within my role, really experienced and professional within that role. And sort of along those lines, basically. You don't have to be the corporate ladder climber at all. They're not expecting that. That's okay not to be like that. Also within the interview, if you can, just demonstrate how adaptable you are. I mean, if there's been companies that have been through organisational changes or bringing in new technology and things like that, mention all of those things, because I think that people like to see that you're adaptable. And, like I know with my interview for the job I've got now, and it was in front of 4 people, and I felt really good actually on that day. I was nervous, but the interview went really well. But they really reiterated the fact that I was dealing with a lot of the community, and it was quite difficult. And I know that the manager was she was concerned, not with me, but just getting the right person that would be able to deal with somebody who's irate because something hasn't gone hasn't gone well for them. We work in local government, so you've got the community that are unhappy about paying rates, and there's all sorts of things that go on in the community out there. There's potholes in the road, they want them fixed, and all sorts of things. So quite often, well, not quite often, but you do get people that can be quite angry. So her questions were really based around that, and how would you deal with that? And they want to see they want to know that you're able to deal with somebody on the phone who's not happy and they are yelling down the phone at you. How do you feel about that? Because you are going to get those calls, and that's where they want to see. So luckily, I had worked in local government before. I'd dealt with community public consultations where people weren't happy about, changes being made within the community. And so I was able to bring that into the interview and let them know how I dealt with that in the past. And, and they were happy with that, because I sort of came up with examples of, this situation happened and this is how we dealt with it. So just really, you have a wealth of experience. You're not just in your 20s starting out. Don't underestimate yourself. You are really powerful. It's your superpower, is that you've got this experience. You just need to keep things updated. So you need to keep updated. You need to keep up with technology. As I said, as a summary for all of this, your resume, have a look at it. Don't just throw it into an employer thinking that'll do. Look to see if it's outdated fonts, the styles. Look at the technology. Are you keeping up to date? Or are you sort of, just, that'll do, but the technology's superseded? It's vitally important. And think about all the things that you've done, all the jobs you've had, and the bits and the experience that you've taken away from that, because we don't look at that enough. I think we downplay as we get older. Maybe if you've been turned down for a few jobs, you've lost your confidence a little bit. don't downplay your experience that you've had. You've had all of this time to work in maybe different careers, or maybe it's just been the one career. So really have a really good think about, break it down, all those bits and pieces that can help you get another job. So yeah, don't downplay that. It's so important, but make sure that you are keeping up to date, because they want to see that, and I go back to the ChatGPT because it's just, I don't know, it's easy to go back to. Really important, because AI is at the forefront so much. So, it's great that as a 60-something-year-old, they see, oh, wow, wow, you understand ChatGPT, you understand AI. Yes, I do. I use it all the time. But that's fantastic. So just be aware of that. It's, just because I don't use ChatGPT or haven't used it, I do now, but haven't used it in the workplace, doesn't mean that you leave it off a resume because, it hasn't been used at work. You still use it. It's still important. So just be aware of all of those things, because that's what will definitely help you get your foot in the door and get to that interview stage. Then that's another kettle of fish altogether, and we've just been through that, so I won't go through it again. So I think that if you do those things, firstly to get the job, get your resume, cover letter, and then when you get to that interview stage to actually secure the job, if you focus on those things, then I think that you definitely have a massive advantage. Just try them, try and change it up. Something has to change. If you are not getting through to a job interview, something has to change. You cannot keep repeating and expecting something different to happen when you're not changing anything. So I hope this has helped. Let me know your thoughts, and if you're really struggling looking for work and what you've been doing, your strategy, what you've been doing. Do you need to change up your resume and cover letters, and how are you going if you get to the interview stage? Let me know your experience. I'd be really interested to find out, sort of your experience with this. Thank you.